Mastering is what everybody wants to master. We want to control perfectly that final step where we make our song stand out more, sound more polished, louder but without distortion. And these are 5 tips that big mastering engineers use but usually don't tell anyone. Number 1, to make your song stand out more and shine, we need to think a bit about physics. The Fletcher-Manson curve is a graph that shows how our ears perceive different frequencies at different volumes. And we naturally hear the mid-high range louder because it's where our voice is. So if we want to make our song stand out, we can enhance this area. I like to use the Fab Filter Pro MB for this, and what I do is I create a band on the mid-highs. What frequency should you use? Well, it depends a bit on every song, but usually around 700, 1000 and around 5, 6, 7, 8K. Usually I like to put it on solo and move the bands. This is a bit too much mids. Something like this is okay, but to enhance it, what we need to do is instead of compression, we need to change this to expand. Change the range to a positive value. I usually like to have around 2 dBs, 3, something like this. But here comes the trick. We're gonna click on Expert. And here we're gonna click on Free. Now we have this little bar here and we're gonna move it to the low end. Something like this. Now the low end is gonna trigger how our mid-highs expand. As you can see, it moves with the kick. And with it, just control the threshold, the range, how you want it. And then check before and after. Especially focus on the vocal. Now our song shines a bit more, but also because of boosting in this area, the loose value is going to be better, it's going to be smaller. So this means our song is perceived louder. The tip number 2 is a technique that will make your song sound louder, but at the same time also sound fuller, and is saturation. When you saturate, basically you are adding more harmonics, you're creating more frequencies. So this way, as you have more frequencies, it's going to sound fuller. And also because you have more frequencies, there's more things going on, it's going to feel louder. You can use any saturator, but for this I like to use the Ozone Exciter. Let's create 3 bands. You can click on Learn and play the song. And what this is going to do is check where the bands are, where is the low end, the mids and all of this. Of course, after this you can change it for your taste. 150 is good for the low end. Just go here, distort it. Of course, don't leave it like this. Try different modes. Usually warm, add some harmonics, but it's not really doing a lot. Or analog. Sounds a bit fuller, a bit stronger. I'm gonna reduce a little bit the amount. And then I like to reduce the mix. Usually have like between 10 and 30. Sounds a bit stronger. Let's go for the mids. Here I like to use a triode. A bit less. Then with the mid-highs, be careful if you use the previous tip, don't saturate that much here because otherwise you're boosting this area way too much. You can use one or the other or both, but maybe not that much in each one of them. I think it has too much highs. That like this. And then for the top highs, I like to use a dual triode. I don't know why, I just like it more. It feels like a bit wider and a bit brighter for me. But be careful. Now after this, of course, click on Gain Match, so it's where you keep the same loudness, and then bypass and bypass. Feels a little bit fatter. And one really important tip, always click on oversampling, at least when you're going to export, so this way you're gonna have a bit better quality. The tip number 3 is something that I'm almost sure that you are not doing. It is so common in the mastering to use some EQ, to give more brightness, to make it sound a bit cleaner, to find some resonance. That's good, use the EQ. But what if we use the EQ only in mid mode? Usually this area in a song can be pretty muddy, because you have the bass, you have the leads, you have the vocal, you have the chords, you have the kick, you have some drums, effects, you have a lot of things going on there, so it can get dirty really easy. So sometimes reducing here a little bit, don't go crazy, is mastering, maybe 1 dB, maybe 1 dB and a half maximum, and of course if you can go back to the mixing and solve it there, better. So what we can do is reduce it a little bit. Here better. sounds a little bit cleaner, but let's think a bit about this. As I said, here we have the bass line, the leads, the chords, and everything. But the thing is, all of them share the center. We have mids of the bass line in the center, we have mids of the leads in the center, we have mids of the chords in the center, but for example, the mids of the bass line are not really in the sides. Maybe just the chord ones or maybe the lead ones, but also the main vocal is not in the sides. So the sides are quite clean, are not that full, not that busy. So what we can do is click here and change the stereo to mid. This way we are only touching the center of these mid frequencies. We leave the sides as they are, we clean in the center where is the chaotic thing, and at the same time, apart from cleaning, because if we don't touch the side ones, we don't lose that warmth, we don't lose that fullness of this song. The tip number 4 is to use a clipper. And yes, I know a lot of you use clippers, but just wait. So first of all, how do we use a clipper? I like to use the K-Clip 0, it's free, go and download it. And what I like to do is to try to touch the attack of the kick, but don't clip more than that. Okay, so click on link, start increasing the in. And of course, here we are touching a lot more than just the attack of the kick that is around this level. So let's come back a bit. Let me see. Here we are not limiting enough or clipping enough, a bit more. Something like this is good. And why are we clipping until we touch the attack of the kick? Well, this is a bit longer explanation, but long story short, if you do it like this, you're not gonna clip that much, you're gonna avoid distortion, but you are preparing this track for the next step, because the clipper is not the last step. We're gonna have a limiter after this. The clipper is just going to help the limiter so it doesn't have to work that hard. And in the end, you're gonna have a way louder song with more transparent sound. What we all want. For the last tip, a lot of people is going to say that it's bullshit, that it's better to go back to the mixing and solve the problems. And yes, of course, it's better if you can go back to the mixing to solve the issues. But sometimes you master for other people, so you don't have that option, or also using this tip can help and is way easier, faster, and you don't need to go back to the mixing and check where are exactly the problems and what sounds and all of this, for really small details. The key is to use plugins like Soothe, Goofos, the Ozone Clarity or Stabilizer to get a cleaner sound, but in a dynamic way and only where it's needed. I'm going to use Soothe, and of course this needs to be before the clippers. And here you have even mastering presets. As you can see, there are a lot. For example, master star, let's see what it's doing. And as you can see, it's not really going to reduce that much. It's pretty soft, -2 on depth. Maybe the sharpness is too high. I like to have it more in a kind of dynamic EQ multiband thing. Selectivity pretty high, so it only detects the big ones. And let's see what it's doing. We need more. But maybe something like this. Maybe this is a bit too much. Something like 1 dB reductions. Let's try the high sharpness. This is way too sharp in my opinion for the master. Maybe like this. Especially the vocal sounds a little bit cleaner. These are really subtle change, but it's going to give a bit more clarity to the song, so just try it. And as I said, the change is that subtle and is in the overall song that maybe coming back to the mixing is not really a good solution. It's better to use it like this. Of course, if you need to use a lot, the problem is in the mixing.